I saw this story about the Oregon football players who were hospitalized after workouts. Now, this is January here that we're talking about. I didn't know if this is where the coach gives the players sort of a sheet that says this is what needs to be done without it being an official NCAA workout there. But you got a new coach in town, Willie Taggert, and all of a sudden you get some Oregon players who are hospitalized. Andrew Greif from the Oregonian is covering this story, and Andrew joins us this morning. Andrew, first of all, good morning. And second of all, summarize this story. Bring the nation up to speed on what's going on here.
Yeah, thanks again, Dan, for having me on. What this story, in summary, is that last week was the first week that players got back on campus for the winter academic quarter at Oregon. They had about a month off from football because for the first time since 2004, Oregon didn't have a bowl to prepare for. And so guys were basically left to do, prescribed workouts, but they had to, the honor system to get it done while they were home. And when they came back, they were put into a series of really difficult workouts. They have a new football strength coach who followed Willie Taggert from South Florida. And, all during the week, players were tweeting about how they had a new kind of soreness and how it was really putting them through the paces. And at the end of the week, 3 players, they were tested and they felt they had kind of extreme soreness. They felt it in their arms, and they were tested and they found to have these elevated levels of what's called CK. That's an indicator for this syndrome that has the extreme soreness, the rhabdomyolysis. And so 3 players since the weekend have been in a hospital here in the Eugene area.
Now, was this team supervised, or was it, as I mentioned, off season where they'll give you a list of things you need to do working out, but there's no coaches there?
No, this was, from what I've been told, it was supervised.
Okay.
Yeah, it was supervised.
But, how surprising is this with what we've seen so far, that Willie Taggart comes in? Is this his doing, or was this sort of the remnants of, the previous regime that these guys weren't in shape?
Well, I think there's a case to be made that there's some of that there was something about them not being in shape. The month off, a month off will kill you no matter who you are, what kind of shape you're in. That's really tough if you're not taking it seriously. This syndrome is largely spiked when you come in and you start intensive workouts, and it's a change because you haven't been doing such intensive workouts for a long time. So that contrast, that rapid to go from kind of static to really dynamic workouts, really hard workouts, that's something that's kind of seen as a baseline cause for this syndrome. This actually, last week I wrote a big story about the review, kind of how the Oregon season unraveled, and one of the core complaints players and coaches had told me was that during 2016, players weren't working out hard enough in the weight room, but they were, one player said they were cutting corners. And so I think that's part of the context and the backstory of, I don't know if that went into any of the new strength plans for, hey, let's get these guys, let's work them out hard, kind of let them know what we're about. I don't know if that was the intent, but I know that that's kind of the backstory leading into this series of hard workouts.
Has Coach Taggart talked about this?
We talked last night. He called me personally, and obviously it's not a flattering story necessarily for Oregon, but I think he understood my point of view. I understand his, but he hasn't talked about it publicly, no.
Can you give us any thoughts on what, any insights on what he was saying, or at least reference anything?
I would just say that, he really wanted to make the point that, and I understood it, that they weren't actively trying to hurt anybody. And that wasn't in my reporting either, that they could step off to the side and seek help from an athletic trainer if they needed, these guys were pushing themselves to a point, at a certain point, that, they want to finish the workout. I totally understood that. And I actually went back through and added into my story that, they could have stepped off to the side if they wanted to. So I think that his biggest complaint, which I'll just share, was this, that, they weren't trying to outright punish these guys. That was his takeaway. And I understand that. I just know that, however many, 100 plus guys, they got through it just fine, but 3 did have to go to the hospital. I think that's newsworthy.
Will they continue these workouts?
A statement from Oregon last night from the athletic department said that they'd made modifications to the program going forward so that they wouldn't have any kind of similar incidents I'm forgetting the exact phrasing from the athletic department statement, but it was an acknowledgement that they kind of had reviewed to look like what had happened, and we're going to try to, maybe make some more safeguards.
Andrew, thanks for joining us. Great work on the story. Thank you.
I appreciate it, Dan. Thank you.
Andrew Greif, the Oregonian, with 3 players hospitalized there. This is a whole different world now when it comes to how much time you get with players, what you do with those players, the safety, working out. But 3 players hospitalized. That's what was surprising here. And there was a label of there weren't intense workouts last year. There was the story, the rumor that they weren't as in good a shape as you would expect with Oregon. With the style that they play, that they would have been in better shape. Did that play into this? Not sure, but 3 players hospitalized.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.